Welcome to Ruins and Haunting Heritage. My name is Dr. April Bisa. I'm an associate professor of anthropology at Vassar College, and this is my archaeology seminar for the fall 2020 semester. For this lecture, we're going to cover Michele Hank's article, Haunted Objects, English Paranormal Investigation, and the Material Mediation of Doubt. And Michele Hank is the author of the book Haunted Heritage that we covered early in this course. So this is a 2019 article, which is much updated as far as more recent, but covers a lot of similar themes into the larger book, Haunted Heritage, which is widely available. Here she starts with an experience that she had in 2018 with a paranormal investigation class that was taking place at Castle Keep in Newcastle, England. And this is a place that I've been to, Castle Keep. And I didn't spend much time there, but I don't remember this box that she talks about. But the paranormal investigation course that was taking place there that she was observing and or participating in had taught the investigators how to use various techniques to investigate haunted places and objects. And the course instructor told the students to apply those techniques to the haunted box, which is, in essence, I guess, like an exam. And this box is what she considered a relatively ordinary 4-foot by 6-foot chest. And she says it was an uncanny object. But the instructors and other people of the paranormal world consider it one of the most reliably haunted spots in Castle Keep. So as opposed to investigating a room or the ruin in general, it was that this is a location that you could reliably get something. And exactly what that something is depends on what techniques are being used. So she gave a context to this class after that in England, it's Michele's experience that people speak of haunted objects rather matter-of-factly, that it isn't something that needs to be investigated. It is that objects can be haunted, and you don't really worry about having to prove it, such as, and she gives the example, somebody said that their grandmother haunts one of their music boxes, right? So this is potentially getting into the ghosts of place. Michele doesn't get into it in any way. But what is the weird thing here, the uncanny thing, is that this group of people feels the need to test this and to prove that these objects are haunted or not, instead of just saying, okay, you said they're haunted by your grandmother, okay, they're haunted by your grandmother. So she talks a bit about Steve, the head paranormal investigator in this class, and that even though he's teaching people how to study and prove whether or not a box is haunted, he himself isn't sure that ghosts exist, and that the reason he participates in the paranormal is that he needs evidence, which is very much in contrast to how Michele sees him speaking to the students in the class, where he seems to be more certain that, this is the haunted spot, let's prove it. And if you read the Haunted Heritage book from cover to cover, you'll see that this is a very common thing in Michele Hank's ethnography of mostly English ghost hunters, that a lot of them are themselves not necessarily believers, and they're looking for evidence to shift them to being a believer. So on page 62, she says that over the course of my research with English paranormal investigators, the same investigators who saw ghosts, felt spectral presences, and monitored haunted objects would express skepticism and even doubt about the reality of these experiences then. For them, doubt was a defining characteristic of their practice. So Michele talks about how material culture, like a haunted box, provides a thing upon which the theories of the paranormal can be tested. She said that these people are generally, these investigators that are testing these things, are generally working class people with little academic training, and they also discount spiritualism as requiring too much faith. They have no faith. What they're looking for is scientific proof of paranormal worlds. But they do this as a leisure activity, not generally as an employment thing. It's something to do on the side with your spare time. She said on page 64 that few investigators were convinced that they themselves had a firm grasp on the reality of ghosts, but both whether they exist or their nature as spirits of the dead, paraphysical phenomena, or other explanations. So there is disagreement within the community, and that's part of how different people have different specializations, that some people think that certain techniques work more than other techniques. And then she goes on to tell a story about another haunted object, and one investigator being a medium, somebody who reads feelings, emotions, gets somebody who speaks to them from the other side, and they communicate that, and somebody who is more of a technician who is using things like electromagnetic field detectors and digital thermometers, and how these two investigators can be investigating the same thing and disagree on the evidence and not trust or believe in each other's evidence, but at the same time form a team seeking to get the evidence and record it. So this is a haunted fireplace at the Golden Fleece Inn in York, England. So they use different techniques and they come up with different results. The medium feels from the fireplace a hateful energy, and the technician sees that the EMF meter spikes at a specific area of the fireplace. They also read a drop in temperature. So we've used EMF meters and digital thermometers in class, and when we're in the classroom, often nothing happens. There is no change in the EMF. So having an EMF spike is an unusual thing. It doesn't happen if you just sit there, right? So, but EMF will spike if there's anything that's conducting electricity. So exposed wires near a lot of metal will help to make it higher. And a drop in temperature, if you're in a fireplace, you're definitely going to have kind of temperature issues going on, that there's the flue or the chute going up, and therefore, hopefully they're taking these things into account, and, they're trained investigators. So we can assume that, there is reason for each other to be skeptical of each other, but there's also reason for the people who are experts in their chosen technique to have faith in the technique that they are using. So even though they were disagreeing about what was going on, they seemed to converge on the same spot in the fireplace, that's the haunted spot. And the medium said that it was a man on the run for some crime. And the technician could just say that there's an energy here, both electromagnetic and temperature. So Michele says that both found the fireplace uncanny, but could not agree on the reasons why. So it definitely was a fireplace, but it wasn't a familiar, normal fireplace, because it was having these strange senses and these strange reasons, which made it uncanny. On page 68, she says that religious scholars like Joseph Laylock have shown in their analysis of crystal skulls, for example, the presence of a tangible object around which enthusiasts can center their subjective viewpoints and experiences, can facilitate an interpretive drift that allows them to embrace new beliefs and worldviews. So the thingness of crystal skulls, of a box, of a fireplace, allows any two or three people to speak to that object, and therefore different beliefs and worldviews can come together in that conversation. It focuses efforts, it focuses discussion. So it might be that objects seem to be haunted more than places at times, because a place, you might be in one room, the other investigators in another room. An object being more of a discrete entity, more tangible, allows us to agree about what we're speaking about, allows us to be next to each other, allows us to have similar experiences at the same time and juxtapose them. So on page 68, she said, Kate and Mark, the medium and the technician, agreed that a particular aspect of material culture, the fireplace, was evidence. However, they remained uncertain about what it was evidence of. This is a very common thing in archaeology. If we excavate, say, an arrowhead, one person will say, well, this is evidence of hunting. Another person would say, this is the evidence of flint knapping. Another person might say, this is evidence of trade, especially if the object shouldn't be in that place or at that time. So going on to page 69, she says, because they remained uncertain about the nature of the paranormal, they concluded that they must continue their investigations. So it's self-propagating. And in a lot of ways, archaeology is that way too, that we've never finished. We're always learning more and more and more and more. So we're still excavating the same sites. We're still investigating the same topics. So returning to the castle keep and the haunted box, the three investigators review their evidence. On page 70, she says, but I don't know really. I was picking up on something, but I'm not sure if it was a spirit or just the electricity. We'll have to go back to the box to see, I guess. And she laughed. So this is her talking about what the three investigators are concluding from their evidence, and their conclusion is that they need to do more research. And this is one of the reasons that the ghost hunting shows have 11, 12, 13, 14 seasons of these shows, and sometimes the shows go back to places they've investigated before. There's never like, oh, this place is haunted and then we'll do X for it, or, we'll charge admission and the ghost will do dances for them at 7 o'clock, right? It's always we have to go back, we have to see more. Also on page 70, she says that doubt, though, is a generative state. It drove the investigators to continue their research. Unlike orthodox science, where research questions are answered and new directions emerge, the paranormal investigators remain fixated on an unchanging question about the reality of the paranormal. So earlier in the course, we talked about the dialectical, that you often, by asking questions, you might resolve some aspect of it and change the question you ask. And that's why research is kind of always moving in various directions. But one of the things that Michele Hank found is that paranormal researchers don't change their questions. They might change their location and change their technique. They might change the time of day that they're there. But the same question is always there, is the paranormal real? Still on page 70, the point of paranormal investigation was not to make new claims about the past. They succeeded in casting the very possibility of knowing the past in doubt, even suspicious terms. So they're still asking the same question, regardless of their investigation, even though they're not sure they're ever going to be able to answer it. On page 71, when I pushed them about the idea of consulting the known historical record, they dismissed the possibility. Those are just historians' ideas, Rose explained. They weren't there, were they? So even though we could see that archaeology could learn a lot from ghost hunting and paranormal investigators, there seems to be, at least in Michele Hank's experience, not really a desire to go the other way, not really a desire to test whether there was somebody in that room that would be associated with that fireplace that might be giving them those readings, or that box came from Spain, as one person was saying. So is there a space for archaeology in paranormal investigation? Probably not. If the question they're asking is just, does the paranormal exist? Is it real? Then archaeology has little to say to that. But there might be more of a space for understanding and recruiting people to go from their paranormal interest in the magical past and bring it to archaeology, to make an archaeology where the past is more interesting because we speak of it in a way that is the way that people want to hear about it. On page 71, she says, in essence, the same concern that clouded Paul and Rose's view of Edith's mediumship shaped their view of historical and archaeological research, a fear of interpretive bias. So whereas a lot of scientists would just say, mediums don't really exist, they're con artists, the people who do paranormal investigations might feel that, yeah, mediums are con artists, but so are historians and so are archaeologists. Still on page 71, mediums, historians, and archaeologists, they suggested, were all subjective. Beyond that, the multiple, often competing narratives of the past that centered on particular objects further destabilized understandings of the past. Objects could be uncanny, and they could exist at the nexus of electrical, spiritual, and historical forces. However, they remained unknowable. So again, if there's no end point, it's always that, well, you can't figure it out, so what's the point? But yet it's the investigation that seems to be the addictive aspect of it, instead of getting the answer. On page 72, she said the investigators' project could be characterized by what anthropologist and philosopher Bruno Latour has called an excessive distrust of good matters of fact. Ultimately, material culture, like the haunted box, became unknowable in the process of becoming uncanny objects that act as repositories or triggers for the supernatural. And this recasting of material culture engendered a distrust of matters of fact. Ultimately, this combination made even the most mundane object seem both potentially remarkable and potentially unknowable. So there is this paradox in paranormal investigation that makes it that it is paranormal investigation, and that's what it always will be, that it's not about some person is indoctrinated that if they discover that this box is haunted, it is therefore haunted, and that's it, no need for more research. Whereas in a lot of scientific fields, once somebody discovers something, it could get tested by other people once, twice, 3 times, and it's always open for revision. But then we move on to something else. So it's not that if one of the ghost adventurers guys goes and studies that box and says it's haunted, that everybody in the paranormal world would say, okay, now it's haunted. It's always this open question because of this distrust. So where do haunted objects fit within this if they both are bringing people together, that this is this discrete entity, the box, that we can investigate whether it's haunted or not, but yet if nobody trusts each other, then we could never say for sure if it's haunted. But yet, if we want to really learn the history of the box, archaeologists, historians, material culture experts can tell you, where it was manufactured, how it got there, what sort of designs are on it, what it was probably used for. But those aren't the questions that these paranormal investigators are trying to answer. They're trying to answer the question of, is it possible for things to be haunted? And that seems to be an unknowable and a result that is unfinal if nobody trusts anybody else to be the person who decides that it is.